What is up, YouTube? My name is Eben, this is The Edge, and today we are going to talk about Glalie EX, a Pokemon who I think is kind of misunderstood and underappreciated. It's 170 HP, 3 energy retreat, weak to metal, nothing to write home about so far. 1 water, it has a coin toss chance of paralyzing your opponent's Pokemon. Okay, well, that doesn't even deal damage. So clearly what we're really looking for here is the second attack, Instant Freeze. For a water and 2 colorless, it's 50 damage. Okay, that's kind of lackluster. Oh, but wait. If you have the same number of cards in your hand as your opponent, this does 100 more damage. So by matching your opponent's hand size, this card deals 150 damage per shot for 1 water and 2 colorless, which, that's not hard to imagine doing. Obviously, DCE is a part of this, so you can 2 energy power up this Glalie EX, so on your second turn, you can start hitting things for 150. It's that simple. That's pretty amazing. Alright, now let's go ahead and clear this up. A lot of people, every time I mention Glalie EX, they automatically start talking about Mega Glalie. Okay, yes, Cryomouth is attractive, I guess, in that you could be dealing 250 damage a shot. But Mega Glalie has to have 10 or more damage counters on him, which means he has to have 150 or less HP in order for him to be hitting that hard. So he's really going to get revenge killed pretty easily, and your opponent has to obligingly put 100 or more damage on this thing for you, knowing full well what that means. And let's face it, on top of that, getting it up to 100 damage yourself is a slow process at best. So it's not really what I call reliable. However, I think while it may not be quite as great as regular Glalie EX, I think it's worthy of talking about Mega Glalie because even if you're going to build a deck focused on Glalie EX, having like say one of these teched in could be a pretty nice surprise, especially if you run some Skylas to go get that Spirit Link out of nowhere. If your opponent puts some damage on a Glalie not thinking that you run the Mega, you could really pick up a surprise KO by suddenly dropping this thing out in a single turn. You definitely want the Spirit Link to maintain your surprise factor, because otherwise, if you just end your turn by Mega Evolving, kind of a giveaway and you'll probably get knocked out for it. But still, overall, yeah, it's like I say, it's a nice little surprise factor. You could tech it in. I can see where you might try that. It's kind of cool. But more about Instant Freeze. Okay, so you can deal 150 for 2 energy. That's pretty awesome, right? Pretty easy to set up, nothing super complicated. But 150 is going to fall short of a lot of KOs. In fact, most EXs will be just out of reach. Alright, well, obviously we're thinking about Muscle Band then. Well, that's 170, and that picks off some of them, but there's still a lot who rank in at 180 who will once again be just tantalizingly out of reach. And that's not so great, but there are other ways to increase damage. One of them is Empoleon. We could take advantage of this guy who makes all your basic Pokemon's attacks deal 20 more damage. Just evolve straight up to him on your bench. You could Rare Candy, you could evolve straight up through the lines, you might even be able to use Wally if you want to get this guy up on turn 2, because you could make a Piplup turn into a Prinplup on turn 1 by Wallying, and then on the next turn just straight up evolve to Empoleon, for example. When you factor in Empoleon with Muscle Band, that's 190 on your instant freezes every turn. And the best part is Empoleon will just sit and chill on your bench, and basically just power up Glalie EX or any other basic who wants to come in and start bopping things. So that's pretty cool. And that could even be kind of fun with, say, Keldeo EX and Expanded. So that's an interesting option. But wait a minute, before we go any further, well, let's think about this hand size matching. Okay, it's easy to add cards with things like Professor Sycamore and whatnot, and you can play out lots of items and energies and things like that to kind of control your hand size. But let's face it, even with that degree of control that most decks generally have, it may still be kind of hard in the end to make sure that we match our opponent. Suppose they get a really big hand or a really small hand. We could put ourselves in some bad situations to try to get there. And sometimes if we have, say, a bunch of supporters in our hand, we might not be able to get a small hand to match our opponent. But there are options for this, like Judge, for instance, who after you play out your hand and put yourself in a good position, you can just straight up Judge and match your hand and your opponent's hand instantaneously by making you both draw 4. Pretty much a guarantee, and you could still play things from your hand as long as they replace themselves somehow after the fact. So that's pretty nice, and it even reduces your opponent's responses because they'll only have 4 cards after you play it. So that's nice. It picks up lots of cool options and synergy with Glalie because we're playing aggressively, so limiting our opponent's cards in hand could be a very useful synergy. And another card that somebody else actually mentioned to me is Battle Reporter. if we can play our hand out down to something fairly small, we could actually take advantage of Battle Reporter. And even if we only draw 1 or 2 cards, remember, our deck wants to match our opponent, and that's what this card does. It matches our hand size to our opponent's. And while we probably wouldn't want to rely on this as much as we do Judge, because it's a little less flexible, still, the synergy with Glalie EX's instant freeze attack is something we can't ignore. And let's face it, if our opponents try to get away from us by building up a big hand size, then this guy's going to be quite useful, and we could really take advantage of it. But alright, so right now we pretty much have to Empoleon and Muscle Band. Suppose we want to go another route. I mean, is there any alternative to Empoleon for closing up that damage? Well, yeah, we could use Bats, and Bats are a valid strategy. But let's think of something else, if only for giggles. What about Greninja? Because Greninja can actually control our hand size by discarding cards out of our hand, and he inflicts 30 damage, basically. He puts 3 damage counters on, but essentially he inflicts 30 damage, which guarantees a kill with instant freeze every time against any opponent, even if you don't have Muscle Band, which could open the gateway for things like, say, Hard Charm to keep your Glalie EX alive, and other options, which is, let's face it, something worth considering. And even attacks on the cheap in case he gets into the active slot by Lysander or something like that. And no, like I say, he always deals the 30 you need. That's pretty amazing. Of course, he's going to be discarding energies, and it's not like you need not a lot for your Glalie EX, but still, maybe there's a way we could take advantage of that too. Like, say, energy retrieval, to get energies back into our hand, to increase our hand size, because this basically +1s our hand, turning 1 card into those 2 energies you'd get back. So we can use that to manipulate our hand size and keep reloading Greninja, or Greninjas, as the case may be, which could even let us take on Mega Pokemon. Of course, if we're just going to reload into the deck, I suppose we could also talk about Fisherman to reload energies into our deck, and, that's cool too. And if we're in Expanded, let's mention Superior Energy Retrieval, shall we? Which can turn 3 cards, basically this and the 2 you discard, into 4, those 4 water energies from the discard pile. So once again, a little manipulation. So anyway, that's just, I know I've run a little longer than I usually do on the Edge, but I think this card really deserves a lot of attention because it can be very fast and very powerful and relatively simple to run. It's not overly complicated. So anyway, I want you to consider this, and I want you to try to build around it. And yeah, maybe I will at some point, but that's the whole point of the Edge, is for us to think about what, you can do out there on your own to have fun. So anyway, until next time, like, comment, subscribe. Check me out on Twitter. My link is below. I leak all kinds of cool stuff on Twitter way before I do on my channel, so you might want to check it out. But anyway, I will see you next time.